Hello. We've already had our introductions, and I've covered who I am. And we know you're here because you're peri-retirement. There's a posh word, isn't it? You're somewhere near retirement. You're either contemplating retirement or you're already retired, and you've got some questions or misgiving about it, which is why you've gone researching and why you've found me, why God brought us together. Okay. So maybe you need to know what it is we're going to achieve with this series of trainings, what it is I hope to impart to you, what God has inspired me with, which I want to share with you. What I'm doing here is I'm basically talking to myself. I am giving myself the training and the information and knowledge I wish I had had quite some time ago before the wheels came off my life. And if I had had this series of trainings, maybe the wheels wouldn't have come off my life. Or if they had come off, I would have passed through it much more gracefully than I actually did. But because the wheels did come off my life, because I didn't have access to this information before the wheels came off my life, I have this God given opportunity and God given obligation to share what I learned with you now. So maybe the course of your life can be a bit different, and maybe you can do a little bit better than I did. My identity, my personal identity, is that of a father. And what could a father want more than for his children to do better than he did? Now, you might be chronologically older than me, but because my identity is that of father, you are my child, even if you're 20 years chronologically older than me, because you are here to learn from me. And that's what the son learns from the father, the child learns from the parent. The creator educates the created. Okay? And there's a few clues in there of what's going to happen. I've just used the theme for this set of trainings about retirement because retirement is where I am, and all good authors write about what they know. So, what better to do than one retired single granddad to talk to other retired single granddads about his journey? And hopefully, that will have some natural authority with you. Now, as we mentioned, I am already retired. I actually retired quite disgracefully in 2009. So I've had a lot of practice at it. And I had a lot of picking myself up by my own shoelaces to get to where I am now, which is a happy place, which is why I'm here doing this series of trainings, trying to get you to find your happy place too. I'm going to assume that you're not entirely happy with your current place, otherwise, we wouldn't be together. So that's my assumption for while we're here. So my identity before used to be that as a worker. It doesn't matter what I worked as. I've had a variety of careers. I kind of changed direction dramatically every 10 years or so. And most of my life, I've been in technology, particularly electronics, computing. See how well that did for me. But I ended up my career owning a laundry and a dry cleaners. So at the point I retired, I had the identity of a dry cleaner or a worker anyway, even if I didn't quite identify myself, because I still really identified myself as a technologist and engineer. I wasn't really 100% invested in the dry cleaning business, which is probably why it failed and I crashed and burned. There's a bit of a clue in there. So if your identity after retirement is no longer worker, well, first of all, you're probably going to go through an intermediary stage where you go, like I did, I'm a retired dry cleaner. If anybody asked me who I was, what I was, the standard demographic of Graham would include, oh, I'm a retired dry cleaner. And then I would go and cover my tracks and say, but I spent most of my life as an engineer and in electronics, and I was in the army. Because almost as if I was ashamed of being a dry cleaner. I wasn't ashamed of it. I was kind of an entrepreneur, and instead of crashing and burning 6 or 7 years earlier than I did, I prolonged it by changing direction and becoming a dry cleaner and a launderer. This was a new business I started, and in fact, if I tell you the story, I should be quite proud of it. And the reason I'm not as proud of it as I could be is simply because it didn't match my identity as an engineer and technologist. Okay. All right, I had to maintain the dry cleaning machine. At least that bit of it was kind of in line with my identity and gave me some satisfaction. The rest of it, not so much. So you can imagine as I spent some time with an identity of an ex-worker, a retired worker, in my case, a retired dry cleaner, but not really an engineer and technologist, I wasn't a happy bunny. And I manifested all the things appropriate to not being a happy bunny. And this is what I describe as having crashed and burned. And I spent a very unhappy 5 years or so immediately after my retirement, which was a medical retirement on the grounds of mental health. I really did crash and burn. But I picked myself up and I'm here to tell you about it so you can hopefully have an easier ride through your retirement than I did. I'm just an average bloke. I left school at 16. I self-taught myself quite a lot. I'm quite pleased with what I achieved throughout my life. But I don't have certificates on the wall to give you, sort of any authority. You should listen to me because I have a PhD in advanced blibbity blobbity. No, I don't. What I do have is I've lived an interesting and full life. It is the source material for where I am now. Anything I'm talking about in this series of training, I can look back in my own life as the source material to see how the identity and the way I looked at what was happening in my life was the cause of my perceived problems at the time. I am now in a position where I can look back at exactly the same events. None of the events of my life have changed, but my perception of them has changed radically. And it's turned me from, how long should we put on it? I'm 68 as we stand here, maybe 60 years with a victim mentality, where I thought I was one of life's victims. I actually felt like life bullied me. And my way to get through life was to learn to just be resigned to being bullied and make the best of it. It's only in the last, I'm saying it's 8 years. We'll go with that. It doesn't really matter because it's a slow transition. You don't really notice. There was no particular point where you said, I was A, think, now I'm B. It's a transition. And really, this is what coaching is about. It's helping people with the transitions in their lives, because transitions are always awkward. They're always difficult. They're always painful. Think of any birth. Is birth easy? No. Is death easy? Contemplating death isn't easy for most people. So transitions, getting a job, losing a job, going to school, leaving school, getting married, ending a marriage, all difficult transitions. And they're all things that our previous existence has singularly ill-equipped us to cope with, because we fundamentally have the wrong identity. And so the purpose of these trainings is to furnish you with a new identity, and the new identity that I have now that has literally saved my life. And I mean literally in every sense, saved my life. And that's why I feel obligated to share my experience with you. So the new identity that I have and the new identity that I hope to share with you is not actually a new identity at all. It was mine, our original identity. It was the identity that we were born with. It was the identity we had before we were born. It was the identity that we had before we were even conceived. I always use this joke. It's the identity you had before you were even a twinkle in the milkman's eye. And if you don't know that joke, I'll explain it some other time. Okay. And that identity is, you are God. I've stopped there for a reason. At this point, we can politely wave bye-bye to everybody who isn't yet ready to hear that message that you, yeah, the finger. It's difficult doing this because I'm not pointing anywhere near the image I'm seeing on the screen. I'm pointing way off to the left. But you, the person watching this video, are God. Don't panic too much about that. You don't have to carry the weight of the entire universe on your shoulders alone, because everything and everyone is God. There is nothing that is not God. God is everything there is, God is everything there ever was, and God is everything there ever will be. And under those circumstances, if God is everything there is, then that must include you, and it must include me, and it must include your parents, and it must include your siblings and your children and your colleagues at work, and the murderers and the rapists and the robbers and everybody else in the world. Everybody is a manifestation of God. I like to think of it as we are all thoughts in the mind of God. And that's why we appear to be individuals, because I am a thought in the mind of God, and you are a thought in the mind of God. And we must necessarily be different thoughts in the minds of God. Otherwise, we wouldn't be separate, we would be one. Another metaphor for this, of course, is that think of waves on an ocean. When the ocean is flat, it can't see itself. The ocean can only see itself when a bit of it is sticking above the rest of it, so it can look down and go, look, there I am. And in fact, it produces multiple waves. So we've got wave A is looking down and saying, oh, look, there I am. And look, there's another wave over there. There's another thing. And that wave B is also looking around and saying, woohoo, look, I can see the ocean. And there's all these other waves too. Look, there's lots and lots of us. Are there really? Yeah, there are individual waves. They have individual identities, they individual sizes, directions, locations. They could be different colors. Some of them could have white caps on them. Some of them could be smooth. Some of them could be violent. There could be all sorts of different looking waves, but they're all ocean. And from the perspective of any individual wave, the wave is simply an example of the ocean examining itself. And that's what I mean by you are God, I am God, everything is God. This process of life that we're in is the process of the universe examining itself, God examining itself, God saying, who am I? What am I like? Okay. We're going to go into this in way, way more detail. I just wanted to let you know what you're going to learn in this series of trainings and realize that it's well within your capability, because I ain't nobody special. I left school with no education, despite the fact that my biological father was a member of Mensa, the high IQ society, and had an IQ of 136. I've only brought myself to manage to do that once and had an IQ of 102. If you know what the definition of an IQ is, the IQ is the average intelligence. So if you took everybody in a community, tested them all, the middle score is arbitrarily called 100. And I got 102. Woohoo! I am slightly above that average in intelligence. So you can see that what I'm talking about is not genius. So where did the information I've got come from? Well, it came from source. We're all God. It came from God. And this video series is basically about you tuning into your godhood and listening to yourself. This is where the teaching that everything that you need is already with you and everything you need is already inside you comes from. You are the universe. You already have and already know everything there ever was to know, everything there is to know, and everything there ever will be to know. It's already inside you. And this is really only about tapping in to your innate wisdom. It also means that you're not listening to some genius. It's just God is talking through to me. I'm just a speaker, literally. I am speaking to you. And if you think of a radio or a TV, it has a little electronic device on the front called a speaker. Even your mobile phone has a tiny little speaker. Think of me as that. Where am I coming out of? I'm coming out of the speaker on your phone, or I'm coming out of the speaker on your laptop or PC, or I'm coming out of the speaker somewhere. I am just the speaker. I didn't invent any of this stuff. Some of the metaphors I got from other human trainers, and some of the things are inspiration. Now, some of the inspiration is completely new as far as I'm aware. Probably isn't. It just means that I'm not aware that I've heard it elsewhere. And some of it is simply I have read or observed pre-existing information and gone, that's true, that's right. And I have been inspired to take that on board as part of my identity. And that's what's going to happen to you. Do not fall for the trick of taking me as any sort of authority. I've already said I'm nobody's authority. I'm letting God speak through me. I know that all I am saying is true. Some of the bits that you will mean something to you at your current stage of development, and some of them won't. Now, I'm not belittling you with that statement. Let me explain what I mean from the beginning. We are all in Earth School. I mentioned that in another training somewhere. It's the rules for being human. Now, school is an incredibly powerful metaphor for where we are and the journey that we're going to be in. I completely understand any misgiving you may have heard being told you were God. It's far, far too big for me. It's one of the reasons why I actually committed suicide. It was too big, or tried to commit suicide. It was too big for me. I realized that if I was God, which was too big for me, I must also be the devil, and I must be responsible for all the evil and bad things on the earth that I hated. And I was actually in my psychotic delusion, because that was the formal diagnosis I got from psychiatry at the time. I was actually trying to save the world from evil. My suicide was actually a good thing in my warped perception at the time. I was saving the world from myself. And you'll find later on that we're all been doing that all our lives to a certain extent. But the point about this is, I was saying that this is a school. And you don't need to worry about being God, because being God is an unfolding. And looking at the metaphor of school will help greatly. We cannot fail as being modern Westerners to think that we know something about Christianity, because we're surrounded by it. And one of the things is, it tells us that, sort of you're a sinner and that you're struggling to be, sort of forgiven and all sorts of things. And all of those are true. What I'm going to do, I'm not disputing a single thing in the Bible. I'm not disputing a single thing that you've ever heard from another religionist. I'm simply putting a different emphasis on it. I'm looking at it slightly different. And I have the luxury of doing that because I have no formal training in Christianity, and I have never read the Bible all the way through, and probably won't. And once again, this is the point that a lot of people are welcome to leave with my blessing, if that offends you. The reason I haven't is because God is ever present, because he's in everything and everyone, and is constantly speaking to us. And our sin is not knowing that and not knowing how to listen. All we need to do is learn to listen to that inner voice, and magically everything comes right. Easy to say, incredibly hard. 2 suicides and about 20 years worth of work to get to there for me. And I hope that we can dramatically shortcut that for you if you're prepared to keep an open mind, that you're teachable, and that you're prepared to do the inner work to get yourself there, to where I am now. As I've said, I'm well in excess of my 10,000 hours worth of study and practice to get me where I am. But if you make this your life, 10,000 hours goes past in the blink of an eye. It doesn't have to be years and years and years and years. If you think about it, if you have the identity of being God 24 hours a day, 10,000 divided by 24 ain't all that actually all that long. It doesn't mean you have to practice for 20 years and try and top yourself to get to where I am now. And that's what this is a point, but to avoid you having to do that. So back to the school metaphor I was talking about. What is the purpose of education? Now, I'm talking about the perceived purpose, not necessarily a highfalutin philosophical debate about what it is. But for most people say, oh, education is I'm going to graduate one day with a degree, and we're going to go with that. Okay? So at what, 23, 24 years old, something like that, you are going to have a degree in something. True or true? True, I don't have a degree, by the way, but it doesn't matter. Call it a school leaving certificate at 16, still doesn't matter. The principle is what we're talking about, not the detail. So how did you get there? Were you born and handed a graduation certificate and said, congratulations, you've got a degree? Of course you bloody well didn't. First of all, you had to learn to suck your thumb without dribbling. And you had to learn to walk without bumping your head on the coffee table. Then you had to learn how to go ga 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 ga, one bottle, and so on. In other words, you did not start off with that degree. You did eventually get to some sort of school. If you're like me, you probably went to preschool. What did I learn to do in preschool? I learned not to make too much mess when hand painting. Then I went to proper school, age 5. What do you learn there? What do you start off with? Did you start straight into advanced biology and start doing Chaucer and Shakespeare in English? No, you learned your ABCs, the fundamentals. Here's a little joke I always like. Little Johnny comes home from school on his first day and says, Mummy, 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 oh, look at me. I learned to write today. And he proudly displays some writing. And she says, oh, that's wonderful, darling. What does it say? I don't know. I haven't learned to read yet. That's tomorrow. Ha ha. I'm a humorist, ain't I? But anyway, so you progress through school and the lessons got, if you were to stand back and look at it externally, more and more complicated. But if you think about it, they weren't more and more complicated to you when you were there. There was nothing. Learning how to do what? Quadratic equations when you were at the level to do quadratic equations in mathematics was no more difficult when you were at that level than learning finger painting was when you were at that level. It's not because, sort of doing quadratic equations is far cleverer and far more difficult. It's just that was the appropriate stage. And anyway, so you progress through the various levels, sort of preschool, primary school. Translate this to whatever we call these in your language. If you're an American, you fucked it up and called it all sorts of different things because you don't know any better, and I forgive you. So, but anyways, primary school, and then you went to senior school, and then maybe you went to university or maybe a technical college, okay? And eventually you got what you wanted, your degree, your final certificate saying you'd arrived at your destination. Now, this is where this metaphor works well, and I hope it explains why I disagree with the emphasis of modern Christianity, but none of the content. None of the content. I think the Bible contains the infallible word of God, and I agree with all of the things that the Christian scholars would teach you, but I think the emphasis is different. And the reason that I think the emphasis is different is because I liken it to you getting your degree. I am telling you that you are God and you've always been God, and you're going, I don't know anything about being God, because that is you're still in God school. You haven't graduated into your godhood yet. And I hope that I'm going to give you a leg up on the way to getting there. When you were in school, the first day in, we'll not use kindergarten, let's go on to primary school for that, that's about age 5, whatever you call it where you are now. Did you get into primary school on day 1 and they say, you failure, you have been here 10 minutes and you haven't got your bloody degree yet. You should be ashamed of yourself. Pull your you sinner. No, they didn't. They actually just found you your seat, told you where to hang your hat. I doubt if they even tried to teach you your ABCs on day 1. I don't remember back that far. There's a lot of preparation work before they even try and teach you your ABCs and your 1, 2, 3. But they certainly do not continually on every day of your entire education career tell you that you are a failed degree earner. And if you wonder what that's got to do with your godhood, you do the research yourself. But the original Hebrew word for sin means simply missing the mark. Okay, if your mark was getting a degree on every single day up until the day you handed your degree, you had missed the mark. You were a sinner. Was there any shame in that? Should you ever have been ashamed on one single day in your life of having been a sinner, having missed the mark of getting your degree? No, it was a glorious unfolding. It was an evolution of self. On every day, you were just being the best version of you that you could for that level of development. So on day one in primary school, age 5, you were just being the best new kid at 5-year-old that you could be. And nobody was criticizing you for not being an experienced 23-year-old on the first day as a 5-year-old. And so on. Nobody was criticizing you for being in Form 2, for not knowing what you should know in Form 3, or criticizing you in Form 3 for not knowing what you should know in Form 8, and so on, and so on, and so on. And if we had lived our lives like that, realizing that every day was just God training, and that one day we would step into our godhood, but we should be proud of ourselves for how we were performing on every day until we got there, I think our lives would have unfolded somewhat differently. Don't you? Well, I think that's enough for today. It's time I had a cup of tea. I am God. I deserve a cup of tea, so I'm going to go and get one. And I suggest that you do the same. So we'll carry on with this at some other time. And these trainings will unfold. And as I say, together, they will embody what I wish somebody had told me a long, long time ago. You probably all heard the metaphor. What would you say to yourself as an 18-year-old if you could go back in time? This is it. And I want this to be some source material for you to reorganize your own identity in your own life, learn to look at things a bit differently, and come to a similar, not necessarily identical conclusion to me. In fact, if you come to an identical conclusion to me, you're probably just parroting what I've said, and that's not a good thing. Nobody likes a parrot. Go suck some seed. That's another joke. I actually want you to succeed, but not as a parrot. Okay? So, bye-bye. Catch you in the next vid.